This episode of the Power and Motor Yacht podcast is brought to you by IMTRA. Sleipner's revolutionary vector fin stabilizers are a true game changer for motor yachts over 45 feet. The unique, patented curve of fins makes them significantly more efficient than straight fins and gyros underway, and equal to gyros at anchor. The curved design of the fin, combined with its lightweight construction, also creates lift when under power, improving the ride while also saving fuel. Learn more by contacting the experts at IMTRA or visit their website, imtra.com. Hello, I'm Chris Dixon, and on this special episode of the Power and Motor Yacht podcast, we're going to speak with a captain who was on Lake Tahoe Saturday, June 21st, when a ferocious thunderstorm swept across the lake. Captain Mike Nielsen is the owner of Tahoe Topliners sportfishing. He's grown up on the lake, and from his 22-foot Duckworth, he had an unfortunate front row seat to a storm that sank or damaged many boats and tragically killed 8 boaters who were caught in the worst part of the storm aboard a 27-foot Chris craft. I sat down with Mike to get an eyewitness account of what went down. Mike, thank you very much for taking some time to talk to us on what I would gather is still kind of a grim time at Lake Tahoe.
Yeah, well, as we all know, life goes on and things keep moving. But yeah, a lot of the locals and then some of the tourists are even in town. There's still a lot of chat going on about what had occurred and a lot of questions being asked and a lot of armchair quarterbacking from people thinking that it was bad choices of going out on a bad day, where it really wasn't the situation at all. It was a very freak storm. It was fast moving, and it was a lot of intensity with it. And if you mix that with just a little bit of inexperience, and we're a super cold body of water. Most of our water temps are in the high 50s, low 60s right now around the lake. We do have
Mm-hmm.
natural currents in the lake that move around, so sometimes swimming in it can be challenging also. So just a bad situation that happened at the wrong time, and I think it wasn't so much of people making a poor choice going in poor weather. It was just a freak circumstance.
Can you take us through, tell us a little bit about your experience I mean, you grew up on Tahoe. Can you tell us a little bit about your history on Tahoe
Absolutely.
and yeah, just and your operation, and what happened that
Yeah.
day? So,
So I was born and raised in Lake Tahoe, and I've been around the marinas and boating my whole life. Started a fishing charter service in 1996 on my own. I've always kind of specialized in smaller private parties, more intimate,
mm,
like 2, 4, 6 people or under, just to kind of keep it more, one-on-one fishing adventure and kind of personalized. There's much larger fishing vessels out there that put a lot more people on, 10, 12, 14 at a time. So I am one of the smaller crafts, and it's kind of how I've always catered to my clients and how I like to fish in more specialized situations. So the weather that came up on that particular day, we've seen it before. One time in my childhood, I was involved with a storm like that when I was a busboy on the 500 passenger vessel, the Tahoe Queen. And on that
wow.
particular instance, we ended up staying out till 1:32 at night when that boat would usually return at 10:30 or so.
Oh
A
my gosh.
similar situation from the west where unnerving weather came in. The seas got big. A lot of clients and customers on the boat got sick. A lot of the workers and the captain made a good call hiding a similar area to where we kind of hid this last one out. And when we returned as eerie as it was this the other day, it was dead calm that night. Now, going fast forward to the incident last Saturday, I had ran my morning charter with success, no problem. Picked up my group at 11 a.m. from South Shore and headed
Mm,
up towards the western side of the lake. I was a little bit north of where some of the tragedies occurred, fishing and watching the storm kind of starting to build up a little bit on the north end, seeing a little rain squall. And over the course of 20, 30 minutes, I kind of made a comment to like, wow, that's moving towards us. And then I started
mm,
layering back up because the temperatures had started to drop pretty rapidly. I was in shorts and a t-shirt, threw on a long sleeve, threw back on my sweatshirt, threw back on my sweatpants, which that just doesn't usually happen at that time of day, and was starting to fish
right.
towards the south, right along the Rubicon Bliss State Park wall where those people actually got into their trouble, and just wasn't really running from the storm, but was paying attention to it and decided to go down to Emerald Bay to the south about 2.5 miles. Went into the Emerald Bay and fished a little bit, let the people use a restroom break. And as I turned around to come back out to fish, that's when and I said something to him, man, it's getting really dark, you guys. This is going to come get us.
Wow.
And I looked down the front of the water, and you could see breakers going across the opening. The opening's a very narrow opening to Emerald Bay, maybe 1,000 yards wide, and it's very shallow. So a very gentle 2.5 foot swell was coming in from the residual waves headed from the northeast to the south shore. And as I was coming across, I noticed several of the bigger fishing vessels running into the bay. So I flicked on the channel that we're talking on, 71,
Mm.
started hearing some chatter and hearing some of the guys spooked. One guy said he almost rolled over sideways and people went flying, and actually got water on the port side, low side, when he went down in a wave, which is a very big boat. It's tough to do.
Wow.
And then we also had another captain from the same outfit who was over in the southeast corner where they all harbor, trying to get to the dock, and had no choice but to point it north into the waves and just ride it out for an hour and a half. And he started saying, guys, they're 7 to 8 foot. And we all were like, yeah, right. We're on the right. It's not 7 to 8 foot. That's not happening. And then another guy that's the harbor where I'm at, he's like, no, Scott, he's like, I'm on my pin. I'm on the buoy. My dinghy's tied up to me. I'm not getting in my dinghy. I'm so scared. And a wave just cracked my windshield. That's when we knew. We went, wow, that's pretty big to come up over the bow of his boat. So my phone service is poor in Emerald Bay, as is most. Once you're in the main lake, you have great service. But we got close enough to the opening where I got a ping from my wife, and I got in contact, and she was really concerned because there was
Hmm.
people in the water and reports that a boat had capsized, and then we started hearing sirens. So we decided to make the smart choice and ride out the waves and stay inside Emerald Bay and let it kind of settle before all of us went out. Meanwhile, a couple of the bigger tour vessels had come in and sought refuge also. One's about the Spirit of Lake Tahoe. I'd say it's over 120 foot long and probably carries about 60 to 80 people. And they kind of
Jeez.
spent some time in there. And then the Tahoe Star, which is probably 55 foot, very, very seaworthy vessel. They kind of stayed in for a little bit, and they went before us. But we decided to wait until we heard from one of the other captains, Bobby. He said, "Okay, they've dropped from 7 to 8 footers to this. It's calming." So the bigger boats went out before myself, and I started to head across. But I made a more of a southeasterly decision to kind of go between the waves and surf them back home, where
Hmm.
they had to kind of travel more to the east and break into them, so then they could come downhill with it. So I was pretty quick to get up on top of them and just ride kind of the front sides of the waves without dipping the bow in too much and navigating through. Within driving a few times, I'd look over to my side, and I was taken back that the waves were as tall as the top of the T-top on the boat at some points. So there was still
Jeez.
some very, very large waves. Yeah. Scary, fast moving. The temperatures had dropped. The downdrafts had created that flow, which most of our weather goes southwest west from that corner up to the northeast corner, and
Okay.
that side of the lake sees more often the bigger waves, and that's where the guys will go surfing in the winter. A winter type storm will create the 60, 70, 80 mile an hour winds, but there's no boats on the lake.
Hmm.
The winds weren't that strong. I would guess they maybe gusted to 30 or 35 the other day on Saturday, but the amount of miles that the waves could fetch created the large swells, but the intervals were so close. You know, people go, oh, 7, 8 foot swells. We see that in the ocean all the time, but the intervals were a couple seconds apart. So you got one
Man.
right on top of another, on top of another. So it can get real tricky if you're not experienced boater.
And yeah, that's one thing I think, people don't necessarily realize in any kind of squally, situation like that, is how tightly spaced the waves can get. And then you also have such deep water in Lake Tahoe as well. Does that compound to maybe what does that make a difference also in terms of how they can
Well,
build
I
up
think
there?
yeah, the depth of the lake is averages 989 with the deepest point at 1,646. But that creates a lot of cold water. Is what we
Hmm.
get when the winds push the warmer surface water off, we get cold water upwellings. And then you get natural thermal movement. And there's actually a wonderful website, and I apologize here, there's a tractor going by.
No, no
Um,
worries.
uh, the thermal movement of the water is tracked by UC Davis and the Lake Tahoe research group, and they actually map it. And this is a newer app that they put out. And I've always known there's currents on the lake, but I was amazed a few years ago. I saw currents as much as 125 foot a minute. The average is usually about
Jeez.
14 to 25 foot a minute. So there's a lot of moving water. You're talking like river type movement. So we do have tragedies up here each year where people drowned, but more often than not, what you hear is they fall in, they go into cold shock, they gasp for
Hmm.
air, and they go down almost immediately. The boat that capsized, I guess the one individual was 37 driving the boat, and the rest were 62 to like 72. So older people, where the boat had capsized is extremely steep. Bliss State
Mm.
Park, the 5-10 yards from shore is 100 foot deep
Oh my
immediately. It's
gosh.
just a sheer wall. So those sheer walls create like a soup bowl effect with the waves coming back. And then you have buildup even bigger. And if you're in the water and you're trying to climb out, I can only envision if they got up to shore, they probably got beaten up pretty bad.
Because yeah,
I don't
because
know.
the rock's just right there, so it's not like you could have just climbed out of the water, right?
No. No, 18 years old. I was over in that same area playing with friends and drinking beers, and I all of a sudden cramped up one day. Had to hold a rock, and I said, "Buddy, bring the boat over." My friends were like, "You're 10 yards away." I can't swim any further. I just couldn't. And I am very careful with my family when we swim. Every Sunday we go out, we tie up the boats together with our friends, and we spend a day on the water. And we always kind of make sure we're in a good area where we're safe, and just try to make sure that if there's anything that comes up, we're all there prepared for it.
You made the point too when we spoke earlier that there's not as much buoyancy even on the water in Lake Tahoe because it's so pure and clear. So you don't have the same.
Yeah.
It's easier to go down, right?
Yeah, well, naturally, the salt water holds you up the best, and you can just sit there and float. We often go up to Shasta this very week, right after our school. Our schools just got out a week ago, so my friends and I usually go up to Lake Shasta, which is a reservoir north of here, with 420 miles of shoreline, and we do houseboating trips. And we always
Mm.
marvel when we're swimming there. We don't notice it. Then when we get back here and we dive into the lake the first week, and we're like, "Oh my goodness, it is so much more difficult to stay up in this lake. There's
Wow.
just no nutrients. There's no minerals." The average depth of clarity with the naked eye on Tahoe, you can see bottom at like 30, 35 foot most of the time. And when they measure it with what's called a Secchi disc, which is a measuring device that they send down, it's generally around 67 to 74, depending on the years.
You said there are I guess summer storms that hit Tahoe. This one was unusual both in its ferocity, but also the direction that it came from, right? Because it was accompanied
Yeah,
by a kind of late season cold front, if I'm not mistaken.
yeah.
Do you think that maybe explain to folks who maybe know Tahoe but that don't know it to the level that you do? How would that be a different situation from sort of your average mountain summer thunderstorm?
So more typical, we'll see the clouds build up over the west where the snowpack is still up in the mountains when it gets nice and hot.
Hmm.
You get the evaporation and you get a big thunder bumper build up real quick. Afternoons, somewhere usually around 1 to 3 o'clock if it happens, and you'll get a real good rainstorm or maybe some hail. It'll maybe be 35, 45 minutes to an hour and it'll pass. Yes, the wind will get strong. Yes, it'll build some waves and it can be bad, but generally that's coming from the west towards the east. A lot of our boat traffic heads to the western side. They just like to go over to that Emerald Bay area. A lot of the marinas are on that side, and that's traditionally the calmer side of the lake. So
Mm.
most of the boats are off the east shore by midday because our prevailing winds are southwest westerly flow. This particular low front was coming from the north. It created right up on the north shore. It blew up in the center of the lake, and
Mm.
so it had just the right prescription to basically make a bad situation for everything on the southern half of the lake. From what I heard on the north end, the waves got big and they did get bad. One of my clients lives up there, and he says, "Yeah, it got bad," but he goes, "Nothing like you guys had."
Mm.
And the South Shore marinas took the biggest hits. Camp Richardson's Resort, Timber Cove Marina, Ski Run Marina, boats sank on their buoys, mooring lines failed, and boats became beached. And when I say beached, not right on the waterline, there was boats tossed up 6, 8 foot up on the beach, so that can tell you
Jeez.
how far those waves were tossing them at some point. About, I want to say maybe 2008, I was keeping my boat at Camp Richardson. And I showed up one morning at 5 a.m. and I could hear the swells hitting just like what had happened with no wind. So whatever had occurred
Hmm.
had just finished. But exactly the same scenario. I walked down to the dock and there was boats on the beaches, sailboats up on the beaches, boats sunk on the pins, docks broken. So that had occurred in a fall, which was like a September. Um, it's just not common to come from that direction in that ferocity. We do get the big storms, we get big winds more often than not. The winter time is when it happens, or early fall, late fall, early winter, and most of the boats are off their mooring lines and pins, and of course you don't have people boating out there. But
Yeah,
we had a lot of people on the water on Saturday. Saturday's a popular day. A lot of rental boats, a lot of private boats. Summer's just kicking off here. It's been a little bit colder than normal, so water temps are down. It just was a bad situation.
it was literally like a perfect storm of bad situations all coming together at once, right?
Even all the experienced captains, my buddy said it best because he got in contact with us. He was ashore and he went over to the marinas to help some of these boats pull in and get the customers off. And he goes, "I've never seen the look on all the captains' faces,
Wow,
eyes wide and spooked." And I was in the Emerald Bay floating around with the guys. We're all getting our ready to go, and I started to get all my PFDs out for everybody and made the one child make sure he was buckled up tight in his and secure. Make sure all the adults knew worst case scenarios. And I looked around, and every other boat was doing exactly the same thing.
really?
And
Yeah.
I can't say I've ever seen that before. When that's when it kind of, I don't want to say I was like scared or anything, but I was kind of like, wow, this is serious stuff right now.
You made an interesting point too, and we talked about this, and of course, as boaters, we talk about how things can go bad so quickly in the best of circumstances, even. And you had an experience, what, the next day or yesterday, even in the swells, and I thought it would be kind of illustrative to, maybe just tell us what happened to you in not
Yeah.
stormy weather, sort of to
Well, here,
illustrate.
here I can preach all I want about making good decisions and be a smart guy and 30 years experience guiding on the lake. Um, I've never had this happen to me. And the day after that storm, I was out fishing with two clients, and I have a little access door that goes from the main boat to the swim platform. So often I'll step on there and to net fish. And we were in a heavy, it was actually probably as much or more wind than that storm had, but it was
Wow.
coming out of the east. So it was coming straight from the east.
And
We
you're
always
close
call it
to
the
fairly close
easterly.
to shore.
Yeah, it's a cold wind. It makes it real tight, heavy chop, but a couple foot, 2.5 foot, 3 foot, but just it's not fun to be in. I just despise the east wind. Well, I'm so focused to go net a fish for the client that somebody had closed the access door, which I never close it, got me across the shin. Before I knew it, I was up in the air and on the swim platform, net overboard, hat overboard, and I landed on the shift linkage for my little trolling motor and broke all that out from the
Oh man.
housing. And frustrated, angry, took care of what I had to do. We somehow got the net back that floated back on the fish miraculously. Got all in, kind of laughed about it, but came home and really spent yesterday processing how lucky I was I didn't end up in the water because just like that, in cold water, clothed because it's chilly out, heavy swells, boats moving. Probably had a really bad situation trying to get back into the boat.
Wow, man, that's
Yeah.
crazy. But it's
Yeah.
it's to your point, and I think I I'm wondering if you think, just, if you'd like to pass on any wisdom to to summertime boaters, or boaters that head out onto Tahoe. What do they, just what do you need to be aware of? you
Well, the
know
basics. Be prepared for everything. Always make sure everything's prepared on the boat and be safe. Have all your throwable devices, PFDs, and all that stuff. I often check the weather apps and watch just to have an insight if something is going to be
hmm
predicted to come up. It's best to work with partners and friends. I mean, we have the U.S. Coast Guard on this lake. We have 6 different sheriff boats, several different marine patrols, fishing game, Forest Service, Tahoe Regional Planning Agencies. A lot of agency boats out here.
hmm
But even with that, if you need help, they're sometimes too far away, and we've
yeah.
had others stump. So we work together. The fishermen work hand in hand. But if you're out boating by yourself and you got to reach over and do something, put that life jacket on, put the kill switch on. If you have to, you know, get caught in some bad weather, don't rush it. Take your time. Worst case scenario, I had a client of mine go all the way up to the northeast corner 3 years ago, and he goes, "Man, it came up huge. I don't know what to do." I said, "Just tie up to Sand Harbor. There's a little pier in there. It's got a break wall jetty. Get an Uber home. Leave your boat in the dock. Worst case scenario, you're home safe, and we'll get your boat tomorrow." But if
Good
you're
point.
scared to be in it, you're not uncertain. If you can find refuge, just take refuge and park it someplace. Um, Otherwise, try to partner up and work with one of the other boats, or need help, reach out for help.
Absolutely. Well, man, Mike, I appreciate your time and your insight on this, and I hope you have a good rest of your summer, and our thoughts and prayers go out to the family that you know that lost so many folks in that storm. It was
Yes.
crazy. I guess as a closer, do you have any recollection of any single event on Lake Tahoe that's been this bad?
For that many, not in one instance. I can't recall. There's been times where there's been multiple drownings in different areas of the lake, or a
Hmm.
lightning strike into the water where stuff's happened. Well, there's been some boat collisions.
Hmm.
Fourth of July evening, there's 4,000, 5,000 boats out there on Fourth of July.
Oh my
The
gosh.
fireworks are launched. They're launched over the lake, so it's a big deal for all the boats to go out and sit underneath the fireworks. And there's been a couple instances years and years ago where boats had collisions with shore and stuff. But yeah, that was a bad one here, this recent one. And if anything else, hopefully it pulled away from more awareness on boating and stuff. California does implement a boating card now that the boaters are supposed to have, but then then you can rent to anybody. So
Yeah.
it's a tough cookie. Boating's not an easy thing. We can learn as we go, but it takes a long time. And sometimes some of these people are very successful, and hats off to them, but buy a vessel that really they shouldn't be operating. It's, the bigger the badder the boat, the harder it is to run. And we all like to see those, boats with
Yeah.
triple
Yeah.
400s on the back of them and everything else. And we're starting to see stuff like that. The average boat went from 23 to 27 foot 25 years ago. Now you're seeing 35, 45-foot boats up here. And those are hard to operate in tight spaces and marinas and everything else. And more or less, you need a couple people to help deckhand with you on that, something like that.
Yeah, for sure. Well, thanks heaps for taking the time, man. I really appreciate it, and I hope that that Mike Nielsen with Tahoe Topliners, that you have a great rest of your summer, and we really appreciate you taking the time to talk to us. This is Chris Dixon with Power and Motor Yacht signing out. You guys have a safe 4th of July, safe summer, and we'll see you on the water. Providing equal stabilizing force to gyros at rest and significantly more underway, while also outperforming all other forms of fin stabilizers, Sleipner's vector fin stabilizers are simply the best on the market. Available with either hydraulic or new revolutionary electric actuators, Sleipner's stabilizers are quiet, efficient, and proven to last with minimal maintenance, using the same gearing technology as aircraft landing gear and the Mars rovers. Learn more at imtra.com.